Hi, this is Adam, and I wanted to talk about a little bit of history about the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. And why do I say this? Because the LA fires have just surpassed it. Everyone's blaming this and that. Um, but here's a real thing. How come all these structures are made out of wood? Everyone knows that wood is like the worst material to build out of because it's can burn easily, can be knocked down by tornadoes, could be flooded. Um, Everything. I mean, wood is just not. I mean, at least the kind of wood that we build out of is not good. Maybe like the old school timber is less flammable than the kind of wood, the two by fours or whatever that we have. Um, you know, After the 1871 fire in Chicago, I mean, they built out of steel, right? Steel and concrete in Chicago. And that's how the first skyscrapers were built actually in Chicago. So that's where the skyscrapers were invented. Um, and you got to remember, like, when the 1871 fire broke out in Chicago, like, Chicago was already an industrial city way back then. They were making things, they were polluting very much. The air quality was really bad. And they knew about climate change way back then. And so climate change and all this other stuff has been known about for that long, for over 150 years. And we keep denying it. We've known there's been oil companies that have known that all the stuff that's happening now would happen if they continued to um, go about what we're doing. By the way, cars make up a small percentage of the pollutants in the air. Most of it comes from factories and all these companies and stuff. The number one thing you got to realize is that if we switch to nuclear power, we could be we could have solved this a long time ago. But we haven't switched to nuclear power because there's so many people that are opposed to it. We can get scientists to figure out cold fusion. If we get scientists to figure out cold fusion, basically, it's a self-sustained power source that could last for nearly forever. I mean, you're talking about the power of the sun, but it's not hot. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy. It would be something like that. Um, so this is something that would be very interesting to go about, and we can figure it out. We can figure, we had all this power, nuclear power and stuff back in the 1950s with fission, and the reason why we don't have fusion now is because there was all these the scaremongering in the 1970s and 80s over like a few nuclear power accidents. But if you look at the data, nuclear power is actually the safest. So what I'm saying is, when Chicago built their city, they rebuilt mostly out of steel and concrete and whatever. And I think with LA, when they rebuild, they're gonna have to rebuild mostly out of concrete or stucco or brick or something. You can't build out of the same 2 by 4 wooden structures anymore. Wood is just not going to cut it. And you can't do 3D print houses either because that's made out of like plastic, and plastic melts too really easily. Honestly, you know, why not build out of brick or concrete? I mean, we've known this stuff for years. Chicago figured it out 150 years ago, and they knew about climate change 150 years ago. So that's why they rebuilt out of steel or whatever, because they knew about all this stuff and they knew about the pollutants, and they started regulations way back then. I'm not making this up. They started regulating the pollutants in the air in Chicago way back then. So we got to do more. We got to figure this stuff out. And we got to stop billionaires like the Resnicks from buying up all the water supply and stealing it from California. It's just not right. I don't think that any amount of money should give you the power over water. Like, that is a resource that we're all going to be basically having wars over. So we had wars over oil and gold and religion before. In the future, we're going to have wars over water. I'm being serious. We're going to have wars literally over water because there's just not going to be enough. Especially if you live in a desert climate like California or Arizona or something. With climate change, there's not going to be enough. Not going to be enough water for you, literally, in those desert climates. That's what I'm saying. And we got to figure this stuff out because it's going to happen. Climate change is real. It's going to happen. There's no denying it now. But it's a factor of all these things. And we got to prepare for this. And like I said, this LA fire is like so much bigger than the Great Chicago Fire that literally burned all of downtown Chicago in 1871. You're thinking about all of downtown Chicago was burned down in 1871. It was mostly farmhouses and stuff back then, and and everything was built out of wood. But think about it, they rebuilt out of steel. That's what LA needs to do. I mean, they keep getting burned down and whatever, and they need to build everything fire resistant. Just maybe have automatic fire hoses or something that extinguish fires, that kind of stuff.